All right, everyone. Welcome to University of Rhode Island Computer Science and Statistics. So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about planning and installing your Windows Server 2012 roles and features. Okay. So once you installed, let's take a look at this first. So let's take a look at what the agenda is going to be for today. So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about the Windows Server 2012 roles and features. We're going to learn how to install a Windows Server 2012 Active Directory. Lastly, we're going to install a Windows Server 2012 Remote Desktop, which comes as part of Active Directory. So let's start with installing and setting up some of the Windows Server 2012 roles and features. So to do that, I'm going to navigate over to my server and we're going to basically continue to follow some of the rules and regulations and set up features that we talked about that exist on the server manager dashboard. Okay. So once you have installed your Windows Server 2012, your job's really essentially just beginning. Okay. Installing the Windows Server operating system is fairly straightforward and is really easy to do. Okay. As an administrator or a computer network engineer or system security expert, when you're administering Windows Server 2012, you get to really choose the roles and features that you want to install on the new server. In addition, when you're installing the needed functionality for the server, you really want to do your best to install only the components necessary for your department or the job that you're at as it relates to the functionality, right? Because one of the things you don't want to do is add any unnecessary components to your server that may hinder the service performance or increase or require more resources, okay? So the installation really is something you want to plan, document, and use the proper installation methodologies to reduce the potential attacks on the surface of your server. Okay, so um, although you will notice when we go to manage, okay, so we're going to click on manage. We're going to click on add roles and features to get started. And then it's going to bring up the add roles and features wizard over here. Okay. And one of the things you can do is you can start removing roles and features, but right now we don't really have any roles and features. You will notice at the top I have the name of my server. So the server title has changed. The name of my server has changed to Digital Forensics because that was one of the first things that we did was we named our server. Okay. Be mindful that each role you install on the server can have different types of considerations when installing and planning. Okay. So the roles that we're going to select are really based on the most common elements in most infrastructures that you will see or be a part of. And the role that we're going to install first for our server, okay, is we're going to install what is known as Active Directory. Okay, we're going to set up a Windows Server Active Directory. So Active Directory is one of the most common functions installed on a Windows server. Okay, AD or Active Directory essentially governs the authentication and access to your network application and resources. It's really a high level of security that provides what's known as directory services that really allows you to organize and secure your network infrastructure. Okay. So before you begin to plan for Active Directory environment, you need to really understand some of the common terminologies used in a typical AD deployment. Okay. So let's actually set these up and go through them as we set them up. So to set up my Active Directory, I clicked on manage. I clicked on add roles and features. My wizard came up. Okay. And then I'm going to click next right here. Then it's going to ask me, do I want to do a remote desktop services installation or do I want to do a role-based installation? I'm not really setting up a virtual desktop infrastructure right now to create virtual machines based on that. I'm really going to set up a role-based feature for this installation. I'm going to click next. Then it's going to show me the name of my server. and it's going to show me the IP address that my server currently has assigned to it. So currently my server has 192.168.255.137 assigned to it as its IP address. One of the key things you want to make sure that you do is considering that I want to make this server a one of the servers that I set up, I'm going to change and make sure that this IP address is actually a static IP. So to do that, I'm going to hit Windows R, CMD, and I'm going to type in IP config. And I'm going to make sure that the IP address matches with what I'm seeing here, 192.168.255.137. I see that there's a match. I looked at the subnet mask. It's 255.255.0. And I notice it's a 192.168.255.2. Okay, so everything looks good here. Before I move on, though, and add this role, I'm actually going to click on my network adapter. So I'm going to open network and sharing. And I'm going to change my adapter settings for my server to make sure that it has been configured properly as the static IP. So I'm going to click IPv4 and I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to notice that my IP address is actually being automatically assigned to my server. So it is not static. So to actually make this IP address static, I'm going to read this 192.168.255.137. I'm actually going to assign this to my network adapter. So to do that, I'm going to click use the following IP, and I'm going to do 192.168.255.137. And I'm going to make sure that the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, also known as a class C. Then I'm going to see the default gateway, which is a 255.2. So I'm going to write 192.168.255.2. I'm going to tell my server to use the following DNS, because what I essentially want the server to do is I would like for the server to talk to itself. So the DNS for me for now is going to be 127. Okay. 127.0.0.1. So this is actually a loopback IP address, which will allow my server to essentially talk to itself. Then I'm going to make the default 8.8.8.8, which is essentially my Google DNS, so it can exit the outside world. Then I'm going to close this, and my network adapter will go through. So you notice the exclamation mark came on it and then it disappeared. I'm going to try to ping to the outside world to make sure everything still works properly. Right, and I noticed that I can still ping, so that's good. Right, and then I'm going to do another ping 4.2.2.2. I can still ping, so I'm able to exit the outside world, so it looks good. So I'm going to exit my network adapter, and now I'm going to continue to set up my Active Directory. I'm going to click Next. Then I'm going to click on Active Directory Domain Services. Okay. When I click on Active Directory Domain Services, I'm going to get all of these different features that comes with Active Directory once I install it. I'm going to get remote server administration tools. I'm going to get role administration tools. I'm going to get Active Directory Domain Services and AD LDS tools. I'm going to get all the Active Directory administrative centers and the snap-ins that comes with it. So these are all features that I can choose to add. So I'm going to add these features. Okay. And then there's a bunch of other features that I can go in here and add, which I will add later on. So I can set up remote desktop services. If I want to remotely connect to the server, I can set up the web server. I can set up Windows deployment services. But for now, we're only going to set up Active Directory. I'm going to click Next. Okay. And it's going to show me some of the features that Active Directory comes with. It comes with Net Framework 4.5. It comes with group policy management, so I can manage all the users and computers on my Active Directory. It comes with remote server administration tools, user interfaces and infrastructure. It comes with the Windows PowerShell, which has already been installed, and a bunch of other things. And if I want any of these additional features, such as the migration tools, the Win server, the XPS viewer, I can add BitLocker for encryption, BitLocker network to unlock and encrypt the network as well, data center bridging, client for NFS. We're not going to get into any of this until we really start covering security in future courses. But for now, we're only going to keep these as the basics, which is essentially all we're adding is the group policy management to manage users and computers in our Active Directory. Then I'm going to click next. And then it's going to explain to me some of the Active Directory stores information about users, etc., etc. Basically, letting me know Active Directory stores information about users and other devices on the network. Active Directory helps administrators securely manage this information and facilitates resource collaboration, etc. So Active Directory provides a high level of security for me to be able to control and manage what users are doing on the system. Then I'm going to click next, and then it's going to say restart the destination server automatically if required. I'm not going to put a check mark on there because all of these services need to be installed. So I'm going to click install. Okay. So right now, what's being installed in my system, I'm getting Active Directory domain services to install, group policies being installed, remote server administration tools is being installed, role administration tools is being installed, AD, DS, and AD tools. All of these services right here are essentially being installed to my system. Okay, so that is essentially what is happening in my server right now. All right, so the next thing that we're going to have to do once this installation is complete is we're going to have to set up what is known as a forest. Okay, so let me give you a brief explanation of what a forest is, and then we're going to set it up. Okay, so the forest is the main and essentially first logical structure for your directory. The forest is the main security boundary, and it will contain all the objects of your directory, starting with your domains. Okay, so you can have a domain inside a single forest, which will automatically have a two-way transit trust with all other domains in the forest. Okay, so the forest essentially defines several things for all domains in the forest. First, the forest defines the schema essentially for the Active Directory structure. The schema essentially contains the definition and attributes for all the objects in the forest. All right. The schema is extremely important to the AD structure because it defines the various objects such as users and groups. It will also define what properties make up those objects. An example of this would be a last name or a phone number. Also, with some enterprise-wide applications such as email, will also get extended to support any new objects properties needed by new applications. Okay, so lastly, it holds what is known as the global catalog, which provides search capabilities for the forest. Okay, so what is a domain? Okay, so before we get into this whole domain thing, let's actually go through setting it up. So once everything's done installed, I'm going to click close, and then I'm going to get something that's going to appear in my notifications or my action center. When I click on it, it's going to say I need to finish configuring my server, which is what it's basically saying here. It's telling me I need to promote my server to a domain controller. In order to do that, I'm going to click promote this server to a domain controller. And then I'm going to get to add a domain controller to an existing domain. I get to add a new domain to an existing forest, or I can add a new forest. So remember, I told you the forest is the main and first logical structure for the directory structure. And we'll give you another explanation of that as well. So what is a domain? So a domain essentially divides the forest into what is known as logical units. Domains are created to help control data replication and are instrumental in allowing your directory structure to scale. Okay, so the domain contains all the security principles. For example, users, groups, computers, and all of that are stored in the domain. The domain also handles authentication for your network, And through this, it provides the base for securing and providing security for your resources. Okay. The domain also helps manage trust. All right. So the domain for your system is considered one of the main security boundaries for your network. Okay. Domains not only allow you to quickly segment resources and access them for users, but it also provides you a tool to delegate administrative tasks. So, what does all of that mean? Okay, let me break it down into simple terms for you here. So, I basically gave you the book version of what the book said. Let me try to break it down for you. In your system or in your computer, you have what is known as a forest. So, think about outside, you have a forest, okay? In your forest, you have different sections of the forest. You have what is known as a domain. Inside of that domain, you can have many different types of boundaries and security policies that exist for particular users sectioned off in that section. Okay. Inside the forest, okay, again, think about outside. All right. What exists in forests? Pretty sure you're thinking about it now. Trees, exactly. Inside the forest, you have trees. Okay. Your trees are where your domains reside. Okay, so think about your forest and you have multiple trees. You can have multiple domains in your forest, just like you have different trees, multiple big branches of trees in your forest. Okay, so a tree is where your domain shares a common namespace as well as security context for sharing the many resources located in a domain. So in a forest, you can have multiple domains, just like in a forest, you have multiple trees, and your trees are where your domains reside. Any domains you install underneath the first domain becomes a child domain. So if I have my main domain that is uri.edu, and then I have cybersecurity.edu, it would be uri.edu, then the child domain would be cybersecurity.edu because the main domain is uri.edu, the child domain is cybersecurity.edu because cybersecurity falls underneath it. Okay. Any child domain gets a new DNS name. Okay. So if I have uri.edu and then I do cybersecurity.edu, cybersecurity.edu would be the domain. However, remember that the name inherits the parent domain name. So for example, if a parent domain name is called uri.com and you install a new child domain called, let's say, cybersecurity.com, okay, so the name for that would be cybersecurity.uri.com, right? Because URI is the main domain for your system. Okay. The next key thing you want to keep in mind and have a good understanding of is what is known as trust. Okay. Trust allows the domains to authenticate resources not natively stored in the domain. Trust can be one way or two way. Typically, trusts are two way. For example, if a two-way trust exists between a domain A and domain B, users for either domain could log on and be authenticated regardless of physical location inside a single tree in a forest. So all the domains automatically have a two-way transit of trust between one another, making the flow of information much easier. Because remember, your trees, okay, are essentially where your domain are housed in, and your forest is what houses those trees for you. So, additionally, two domains that exist inside of a forest will automatically have what is known as that trust. Okay. So let's set up this domain. So we're going to add a new forest. Okay. And we're creating a new forest. So the new forest is going to be our main domain, right? Because we just talked about what a forest is. And we're going to call this new forest, let's call it CSF 432 dot org. Let's do dot edu. CSF 432 dot. Let's do dot org. Okay. Dot org. Okay. Once I set up the root domain name, I'm going to click next. And then it's going to ask me for a password for my domain, my DNS server, my domain name system. So I'm going to set that up. You want to make sure your password is 8 or more characters with a combination of different types of characters. Then I'm going to click next. And then it's going to say a delegation for the DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. That's fine. There is no parent zone. I just created it. I'm going to click next. Okay. So it's going to say can't find a parent zone because it's assuming that there was a parent and this is supposed to be a child, but this is a brand new forest without a parent. Okay. So while this is downloading, another thing you need to definitely know about your domain. Okay. So this is all set. We'll get back to that. I'm going to click next. And then it's going to go through its process of installing. So it's going to show me where my Active Directory database is going to be stored. It's going to be stored in log files called sysvolume. The database folder is going to be under Windows NCDS. This is basically all the locations of these folders are going to be. If you need to, you can create backups of these paths. Usually, in most environments, you will have a backup of your server, okay, because it'll be a virtual server. Click next, and then it's going to show me a script that I can take a look at of everything that's going to be installed. So it's telling me that I'm going to add a forest. In that forest, I'm going to create a DNS delegation. It's going to create a path for all of these systems. It's going to create a domain called css432.org. That forest is going to exist under a Windows Server 2012, and then it's going to install a location for my database to occur, and it's going to force that installation through. Then I'm going to click next after I've viewed the script and verified that everything looks good. And then it's going to say one or more prerequisites failed. Please fix these issues and click rerun prerequisites. Okay. So the reason that you may run into this issue is because let's take a look. It's saying verification of the prerequisites for domain controller failed. The local administrator account becomes the domain administrator account. When you create a new domain, the new domain cannot be created because the local administrator account password does not meet requirements. Ooh, okay. If you see this, don't worry. All this essentially is saying is I need to log out of my system and log in as an administrator. So I'm going to click cancel. Okay. And I'm going to X this out. I'm going to go to start right here. What did I just do? Okay. I'm going to hover over. Okay. I'm going to sign out as a local administrator. And I'm going to log in as an administrator. So it's going to tell me I need to change my password. Okay. So I am going to do that. And I am going to now have administrative privileges, and I will be able to log into my server and continue setting this up. So I'm going to, again, promote the server to a domain controller. It's going to go through its process. I have to, again, do the same thing, add a new forest, cancel for now. And then I'm going to do csf432.org. Then I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to go through the process similar to what I just did. I'm going to add a password to set this up. Again, same thing. I don't have a parent zone. No, I recognize that. I'm going to do next. And I'm basically going to walk through the same exact steps that I just did. The script is all set. And then it's going to go through and verify the prerequisites for the domain controller, that the prerequisites for the domain controller are all met. I get all these exclamation points saying all prerequisites checks passed successfully. Click install to begin the installation. So I'm excited. Everything looks good. I'm going to click install, and the installation process for my server is going to begin. So everything looks good here. And it's basically going to wait for the DNS installation to finish. And once it is done, I will be all set and ready to go. So that is how you install and set up Active Directory and remote services in your Windows Server 2012. Okay. Once this is fully installed and completed, you will be able to log into your system as the new user. Okay. So right now it's saying this server was successfully configured as a domain controller. So everything looks good. Okay. So I now have a domain controller and I now have created a domain. So I'm going to close it. It's going to ask me to restart my computer. It's going to restart for me, and we'll continue on in the next lecture talking about configuring and finalizing our domain controller. Thank you for watching.